The silence in New York City Hall lasted exactly 38 seconds. 38 seconds, where Stephen Schwarzman, the billionaire CEO of Blackstone Group who controls $975 billion in real estate assets, sat frozen at the witness table. Across from him, newly elected NYC Mayor Zohran Mamdani held a manila folder that contained something Wall Street had spent 15 years hiding. But to understand how we got to this moment, we need to go back 72 hours earlier, to a cramped office in Queens, where the most explosive housing scandal in American history was about to unfold. January 24th, 2026, 11:47 p.m. The lights were still burning in Mamdani's Queens office. Most of his staff had gone home hours ago, but Chief of Staff Elena Rodriguez remained at her desk, hundreds of pages of documents spread before her. What she had in her hands was the product of the kind of all-nighter that would make law school students weep. "Mayor," Rodriguez said, her voice carrying equal parts excitement and fear, "what we found here, this ends careers." Mamdani, who'd spent years as a tenant rights advocate before earning his law degree at Columbia, studied the documents with the methodical attention of someone who'd built cases from the ground up. The files sprawled before him weren't just a story of abuse. They were a comprehensive map of systematic fraud, tax evasion, and corporate deceit. Blackstone Group, one of the world's largest private equity firms, owned more than 47,000 residential units in New York City alone. And according to the documents Rodriguez had uncovered, they'd been lying to New York about every single one of them. "Show me the tax assessments," Mamdani said, using that methodical approach of a former tenant organizer who knew how to build airtight cases. Rodriguez opened a thick binder. Inside were Blackstone's internal reports, the real valuations that the company's own assessors assigned to their buildings, and then the tax filings they'd submitted to the city. The difference between the numbers was blood-chilling. Building in Park Slope, Rodriguez traced her finger across a red-flag document. Blackstone's internal assessment, $89 million. Tax value reported to the city, $34 million. Difference, $55 million. "Keep going," Mamdani said, his voice carrying that dangerous calm prosecutors get when they smell blood in the water. Astoria Complex, internal assessment, $156 million. Reported, $62 million. Harlem Buildings, internal valuation, $203 million. Tax filing, $78 million. Each number made Mamdani's pen move faster across the paper. The pattern was undeniable. Blackstone was systematically underreporting the value of their properties to New York City, avoiding millions in tax payments. But Rodriguez wasn't finished. "Mayor, that's not even the worst part." Mamdani looked up. How could it get worse? In these same buildings, Rodriguez continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, "they told tenants they needed to raise rents because of increased property values. I found court documents." In eviction proceedings, Blackstone lawyers claimed these buildings had appreciated dramatically in value, justifying 40% rent increases. Mamdani's stomach turned. Blackstone wasn't just evading taxes, they were defrauding tenants. Reporting low values to the city, then using high values to justify rent hikes to tenants. "This is double fraud," Mamdani said quietly. "This is federal crime territory." But something was missing. How had these internal documents been obtained? Blackstone was known for keeping such files locked down tight. As if reading his thoughts, Rodriguez pulled out another document. "Mayor, there's something else you need to see. We got this information from a whistleblower." The whistleblower was a woman named Jennifer Walsh who'd worked in Blackstone's property assessment division for 8 years, and her conscience couldn't take it anymore. Walsh's testimony provided a crystal-clear window into Blackstone's internal operations. She detailed how CEO Stephen Schwarzman had personally approved the tax minimization strategy, how senior executives deliberately submitted false information to the city, and how employees at every level had been instructed to hide this fraud. This, Walsh had written, isn't an accounting error. This is company policy. Mamdani looked at Rodriguez. When's Schwarzman testifying? 3 days. NYC Council budget hearing about Blackstone's housing investments in the city. Mamdani smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "Then, let's get ready." The next 72 hours passed like preparation for legal warfare. Mamdani's team verified every document, cross-checked every number, triple-reviewed every claim. The internal emails Walsh had provided were particularly damaging. In one email dated July 2024, Schwartzman had written to his CFO Sarah Mitchell, "Sarah, we need to optimize our NYC tax assessments, keep the numbers as low as possible. The city doesn't have the resources to audit what we're doing." Another email from September 2024, Mitchell to a regional director, "Make sure assessments align with city records, not our internal projections. We don't want tenant lawyers making comparisons." The evidence was overwhelming. But Mamdani knew Schwartzman would be prepared for something. Billionaires had armies of lawyers, media consultants, and political connections. January 27, 2026, hearing day. The New York City Council chamber felt different. Reporters had arrived earlier than usual. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, they were all there. Rumors had been circulating. Mamdani was planning something. Stephen Schwartzman landed at LaGuardia on his private jet and arrived at City Hall at 9 a.m. Dark suit, blue tie, Yale ring gleaming. He brought 5 lawyers and 3 media consultants. He was a man who looked confident, someone who had everything under control. But something inside bothered him. Mamdani's office had been unusually quiet about the hearing. No question lists had been circulated, no information leaked to the media. This silence was the kind that comes before storms. At 10:15 a.m., the hearing began. The room was packed. Council members took their seats, Mamdani in the center high chair, Schwartzman at the witness table. The first hour passed like typical New York political theater. Republican council members praised Blackstone's investments in the city, talked about employment numbers. Schwartzman delivered his prepared remarks comfortably. "Blackstone is a critical player in New York City's housing sector," he said smoothly. 47,000 families live in our buildings, and we're proud to provide them with quality, affordable housing." Democratic members asked sharper questions, but still, predictably. Rent increases, maintenance issues, tenant complaints. Schwartzman navigated each one easily with years of polished diplomatic responses. But Mamdani hadn't asked a single question yet. He sat quietly, occasionally taking notes, letting council members exhaust their time. Then, at exactly 11:32 a.m., Mamdani's turn arrived. "Mr. Schwartzman," he began, his voice calm but carrying dangerous precision, "I want to start with a very simple question." Schwartzman nodded, his shoulders visibly relaxing. "How does Blackstone report property values to New York City for tax purposes?" Schwartzman laughed lightly. "Mayor, we use professional assessors. We're in full compliance with industry standards and city guidelines." "Interesting," Mamdani said, opening his first folder. "Because I have Blackstone's internal assessment documents." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Schwartzman's lawyers leaned forward sharply. "Let's take your building at 247 7th Avenue and Park Slope." Mamdani continued, his voice now carrying that prosecutorial tone. "According to Blackstone's own internal assessment in 2024, this building is worth $89 million. Is that correct?" Schwartzman hesitated. Internal assessments were supposed to be confidential. "Mayor, internal company documents. True or false, Mr. Schwartzman?" $89 million. Yes or no? "Our internal projections vary based on market conditions. Yes or no?" Schwartzman's face flushed slightly. "If that document is genuine, then that's probably an approximate estimate." "Great, thank you." Mamdani pulled out another document. "Now let's look at the tax filing you submitted to New York City for that same building in 2024. Reported value, $1 trillion. Silence. Mr. Poklow. "Schwartzman, did you report a building you told yourself was worth $89 million to the city as $34 million? Tax assessments are complex. That's a $55 million difference. That's a 62% discrepancy. That's not complexity, Mr. Schwartzman. That's systematic fraud." The room was now in complete silence. Reporters were frantically typing. But Mamdani wasn't finished. "Let's try another one. Your Astoria complex." The next 8 minutes were methodical destruction. Mamdani, building by building, listed the differences between Blackstone's internal assessments and the values they reported to the city. In total, Mamdani finally said, Blackstone has underreported the value of your properties to New York City by $4.2 billion. The number hung in the air, $4.2 billion. That, Mamdani continued, means New York City has been losing approximately $167 million in tax revenue per year. Schwartzman tried to open his mouth, but no words came out. His lawyers were frantically scribbling notes. But Mr. One, here's the best part. Mamdani's voice now carried that sweet anger tone. We also know what you told tenants. A third folder opened. Court documents. In 2023, you notified tenants in the Park Slope building of a 40% rent increase. What did your lawyers tell the court? Let me read. Due to dramatic increases in property values, these increases are necessary to reflect market rates. Schwartzman's face went pale. So, Mamdani said, emphasizing each word. On one hand, you're telling the city the building is worth $34 million to avoid paying taxes. On the other hand, you're telling tenants the building is worth $89 million to justify rent increases. That's double fraud, Mr. Schwartzman. The room erupted in chaos. Even Republican council members looked shocked. Democrats were barely containing their excitement. And then Mamdani delivered the knockout blow. Mr. Schwartzman, I want to read you an email. From your CFO, Sarah Mitchell, dated July 12, 2024. Quote, Stephen, we need to make sure NYC doesn't have the resources to actually audit what we're doing. Keep the numbers low. They'll never notice. End quote. Schwartzman's phone rang. A name appeared on the screen that everyone in the room could see. David Solomon, Goldman Sachs CEO. Wall Street was already mobilizing. Mr. Schwartzman, Mamdani said, his voice carrying triumph. Feel free to answer that call. I'm sure your bosses would love to hear from you right now. Schwartzman stared at the phone, frozen. If he answered, he'd be admitting he took orders from bosses during a hearing. If he didn't answer, he'd be admitting he was in too much trouble to talk to anyone. He chose to decline the call. Mr. Schwartzman. Mamdani's voice now filled the entire room. It's time to tell the people of New York the truth. How long have you been systematically defrauding New York City? Schwartzman looked around desperately. His lawyers couldn't help him. Council members were avoiding eye contact. Mayor, he finally whispered, I think I need to speak with a lawyer. It was as good as a confession. Billionaires don't need lawyers to answer questions about legitimate operations. The room exploded. Reporters rushed to file stories before the hearing even ended. Council staff tried to understand the implications of what they'd just witnessed. But through it all, Mamdani sat calmly at the council table, manila folder still open in front of him, looking like someone who'd just witnessed history being written. He hadn't just exposed one of Wall Street's most powerful figures. He'd done it with the precision of a surgeon and the tenacity of a pit bull. In 11 minutes and 47 seconds, a Democratic Socialist mayor from Queens had shaken a $37 billion fortune to its foundations. And he'd done it with nothing but the truth and the courage to speak it. The dominoes started falling immediately after the hearing. Within 2 hours, Blackstone's stock dropped 7%. Within 4 hours, 3 major investment funds announced they were demanding Schwartzman's resignation. Within 24 hours, New York State Attorney General Letitia James announced she was launching a comprehensive tax fraud investigation into Blackstone Group. Within 72 hours, Stephen Schwartzman had submitted his resignation letter. And Mamdani? He was preparing for the next battle. Because Blackstone was just one name. There were dozens more companies on Wall Street exploiting New York's tenants. And now they all knew. Zohran Mamdani had come to expose the truth, not to negotiate.